We have a competitor that has completely said we want no involvement with AI. That's either a mountain to die on or you're going to be a leader in 5 to 10 years. If people aren't using the AI, they're either going to work themselves into the ground or, again, they're going to probably fail. You have smallest room of margin where you will lose their trust because they're already skeptical about AI based on media or what they're hearing in the news. For organizations, that is the $50 billion problem to solve right now, is how do we solve the problem so that the user experience becomes so fluid and human-like that it doesn't feel like an AI solution. I don't think we've fully solved for that, even in any industry.
Two product minds, thousands of launches, billions in impact. From Apple Pay to Amazon, welcome to the Product Lab.
Hi everyone, my name's Anish. I'm one of the co-founders of the Product Lab. Today we've got an amazing guest, very interesting role. So a gentleman named Josh, a good friend of mine, Senior Director of Product in AI and Platform at UKG. If you're not familiar with UKG, it's a workforce management platform that does everything from HR to payroll. But it didn't start there for Josh. Many years ago, Josh was actually part of the original group that was working on Watson, the AI tool that many of you were familiar with before AI became so blown and big. Very interesting. He was doing that as a solutions engineer. So he's been in the AI space for many years. Between Watson and UKG, he was a startup founder for many years, actually nearly a decade, ran many teams, different departments, has always done it in the AI space. He was actually building a search engine completely built on AI. So he has a ton of experience now. He's doing it at a very large company. So Josh, first of all, super excited to have you here. Excited to talk about what life is like in a larger environment of 10,000 plus employees when you're trying to implement AI. So first, feel free to share an introduction, share a little bit about yourself, and share a little bit about what's going on in that role.
Yeah, thanks guys, and thanks Anish and Jihad. Pleasure to be here. Excited to get talking about all this fun topics. My current role, so spent many years as a founder. I had a lot of learnings. As Anish said, I started my career in the IBM Watson space back when Watson was on Jeopardy and AI was really a thing that never was going to come to us, but here we are. And now I'm at a UKG really exciting role where building out AI and trying to put it in the hands of a lot of users that aren't really used to using AI. A lot of our users have flip phones or are on the front lines and don't even really experience a ChatGPT or a Claude on a day-to-day basis. So fun challenge of trying to introduce that into their work environment, into their lives in a tangible way that's slow and steady versus all in their face all at once. So I'm excited to get into some of those topics.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about it because I think there's been some major, I wouldn't call it a hangover. I would call it maybe a sobering of how difficult it is to actually deploy AI to production workflows at scale. And I think once the hype is down, I mean, there's maybe a severe overreaction on this side that, oh, yeah, AI is not going to work at all for business. And, it's a massive buzzbull. And maybe there's some arguments on other sides. Um, it's a two-parter question. Why is AI adoption so low in businesses so far? And two, will that change and how?
Yeah, good question. So I think AI adoption is low right now. Obviously, it depends on the user base, right? So I look at the world where we have technical founders, technical users, and the adoption's super high because they have all these ideas and they can tinker and play and expand on it. Then you come into probably the larger portion of the world that doesn't use AI on a regular basis, or they're general consumers of ChatGPT in like a search use case. How do I make this recipe? Nobody's going beyond that. And so a lot of the users in most of these corporations fall in that bucket. And so getting adoption up is really first forming some value proposition that solves this simple problem. But the more important part behind that is the trust factor, right? Like you have the smallest room of margin where you will lose their trust because they're already skeptical about AI based on media or what they're hearing in the news. So it's like all the companies are going with, here's the value we can provide, but nobody's solving for the arc of trust. And that's the most important part. And making sure that there's a playbook, just like if you think about product led growth, right? Like we think of like a top of funnel down to the bottom funnel. You got to think of the same process, but for trust. And in my current role, that's what we're focused on right now with Frontline, where, people that are firefighters or people that are mechanics or working in schools, they're dealing with people every day. And if they touch this tool that they never use and something goes wrong, or it says, I don't know the answer, or it's hallucinating, immediately like, I'm going back to my manual spreadsheet or my manual way of doing something because I don't trust it. That's the holy grail, is trust. And so like as a product person, we immediately go to this cool thing it can do and the value prop tied to it. And there's really a trust arc that we have to figure out how to solve for.
Why is business AI adoption low? Which I think you answered, which is like the trust, but then also afterwards, maybe what we need to implement there, right? Which is like guardrails, including like much more of like a clear path, not just letting the AI agent do its thing, have fun, like there has to be like just more vague, clear, concise constraints. And what I would argue, like smaller, tighter scoping can also help with that. But I could imagine it as like a technical problem, which, having those constraints or orchestration, all of that could definitely help a lot. But I also think about the people side that you mentioned, which is like, there's just a lot of low trust. Maybe it's how to interact with it. Maybe it's just change management, right? Especially, larger companies moving from one process to another. So I would love to hear more about the people aspect as well of the technical side as well.
Yeah, I think I could say this from a founding point of view and just in a big business. The biggest thing that I see is a lack of empathy for what the end user or the other person on the other side is going to use it for and how they're going to use it. And what I see in my current job and previous roles is this massive excitement for over architecting or over engineering some awesome, cool AI tool or workflow, when in reality, a user might use a tenth of the value, right? Like I like to use an iceberg analogy. Like an iceberg is like 5 to 10% above the water, and then the rest is below. Most people in the US are in that top 5, 10% of tapping into AI value. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're not ready to go deeper, or they don't know how, or they can't wrap their head around the endless possibilities that is below the surface. And so I'm in the space now where I have to like connect what the technology can do to what they can wrap their head around, and what they, like thinking about templates, playbooks, recipes, spelling things out to get their brain going so that they can complete a use case or a workflow, right? Like, what is it? I saw a stat like the most common question asked of ChatGPT is what's the weather outside? Or the other one was like common use case was like a therapy use case where they're just like they want somebody to talk to. And you have to translate that into into value on the business side. So now you have to like, how do I get them thinking that this conversational, autonomous AI agent on the side can complete tasks that they've been doing manually for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And it sort of turns from like a technology problem. We're now in a UI user experience problem domain to solve for. I don't think we've fully solved for that even in any industry. Technology, we're booming rapidly. People cannot keep up. That's my read right now, and that's what I'm focusing on in my daily role. And it's funny because when I was a founder, it was a similar problem, but it's always been a user experience problem. The technology has always been ahead of people. And so that's where founders get caught up, right? Like they create these awesome technology solutions and then they fail or fall down with how the user connects the technology to the value prop to the user experience. And I think it's like the most common area where a product person or a founder could trip up because they're caught up in the shiny object.
You talked a lot about user experience and trust. I think you're right. It does come back to that, especially when you're on the tip of the spear. No one's going to immediately trust something that they can't wrap their heads around and understand. In your case, with the workforce that you work so closely with, what are some of those use cases or workflows that they trust AI? And then what are the workflows where they're the most skeptical? It might give our audience a little bit of an idea of just where the where more of a common workforce may stand today?
Yeah. So I think we're at the point now where like the trust is starting to, we're earning trust on a question and answer basis or a summarization or a content creation type use case. Where we're really struggling is having, I'll give you an example in payroll, right? You have a controller or accounts receivable associate who's running payroll. They've been doing it manually, either in a spreadsheet, QuickBooks, some payroll general ledger platform. And they've been doing it where they're checking it line by line. They're making sure everything goes through. Now we're asking them to basically hand it over to an agent that can do it rapidly. But now like they're going, where's my role? And so there's a part where it's like, it's a control factor. It's always control and it's trust. I think handling or mitigating the control factor is being transparent on what you're doing. So like decision tree logic, right? Like when you're using a ChatGPT or a Claude, while it's writing or reasoning, it's giving you sort of a step by step on what's happening. In a business case, that's super important to provide transparency to, like, I'll say, to relieve their control issues. Because, again, this is sort of case by case, but in a payroll scenario, you're dealing with paying people every 2 weeks or weekly or monthly. There's a lot of like anxiety around that whole process. And then there's a massive repercussion if it doesn't go successfully. So being able to provide something that just walks them step by step is that's our like walking them across the bridge phase right now. Eventually, we hope that they trust it to the point where they don't need to be walked across the bridge. But right now it's here. We're going to tell you every step that our AI agent's doing. Here are the errors it found. Here's the success rate. It's like metrics, step by step, all the visibility you can give. And some would argue that takes just as long as running it, on their own, but it's a necessary step to get them to a point where they trust it. And then they can start saving time or focusing on more high value use cases.
Right. Actually, it's a very interesting parallel to some conversations I was having with my engineers because, it's 40 engineers and we talk a lot about how we're using AI in the coding workflows. And kind of very similarly, they use the planning agent to, Cloud Code planning agent to figure out exactly like step by step what exactly the agent is going to do. And then they deploy it to actually generate the code. And then afterwards, they'll review the code and then ship it. And so this planning mode changed the game for them. They were like, now that I know in detail exactly which components, which things are going to be changed, how they correlate to each other, that brought the confidence for them to basically be like, hey, I can actually trust the generated code. Versus, you just get the code and you're like, I don't know. Like, and it could be like a really critical moment, especially for coding, which is, would they be able to trust the generated code without looking at the planning? Should they, right? And this is just maybe a loose analogy to even other workflows, that the accounting workflows that you mentioned, but in really like critical systems, I think that planning and the agentic description of like what they're going to do is going to be really critical, like the meta description before doing it. So that was just a thought that came up when you were mentioning it.
Definitely seeing a lot, like a big trend of like manager of manager, orchestrator or supervisor type agent infrastructure. And it's funny how this has evolved, because it's like we started with Gen AI, which just, was large language models and just gave predictive type use case outcomes. Now we have agents that are sort of doing a couple tasks autonomously. Now you have an agent that's overseeing the agent that's autonomous. It's just like we're creating this infrastructure. But I'm starting to see like org structures where at the bottom of the org structure, you have an agent. Above that, you have an agent manager. And then above that, you have a person. And it's like, so that's how lean, or I'll say more technology forward companies have started to evolve, going low level tasks, agent, now a manager overseeing those tasks. How high are we going to go up the org chart?
So Josh, I'll adjust, or I'll shift the conversation a little bit to focus on the building of the agent, because I'm very curious how you all do it at your company today. Leaner companies, obviously everyone's jumping in, all hands in, everyone's trying and testing. where you have a bit more structure. Who builds agents at your company today? How do you build? Do you build using, and of course, anything that you've already publicly shared, do you build using the most common tools like OpenAI? Do you build on other platforms? Who builds? Who's helping with testing to make sure you're right? Like it doesn't hallucinate. It is driving those as accurate information as possible to continue pushing on that character of trust. Who does that today?
Yeah. So just baseline infrastructure, we're very closely partnered with Google. So we build on top of Google's Vertex platform. And then on top of that, we've trained models specific to our data sets. In terms of building, we have UKG is interesting because it was two massive companies that merged. And we have an AI dedicated pillar that builds for the entire company. And then we have different divisions that consume from that. So it's more of a there's a main team that's building the framework and the technology out. And then there's a decentralized approach of saying all the teams that are very domain, like subject matter focused, are enabled to build all the different agent functionality that they need for payroll or for HR or for scheduling. And then they're making use of so my role is AI and platform. So my role is focused on the framework side of it, building the RAG pipelines, building the LLM pipelines, building predictive machine learning pipelines so that when a subject matter expert, like downstream team, wants to build specific to payroll calculation or HR interview scheduling, they build their own little agent using the pipelines created by the central team. Now, the challenge is that you have all these downstream teams building agents one off. You still need to roll it back up into a unified user experience. And that I'm not going to joke around. That has been the hardest problem to solve here, is decentralizing and then somewhat centralizing with like guidelines on how to bring it all back together into a single AI assistant co-pilot feel and bounce between 75 to 150 different agents behind the scenes that all do different things. In a smaller company where you're building an agent or two, that problem doesn't exist. Then you start scaling and you have like a bucket of 100 agents behind the scenes. Now you're thinking about getting caught in a thread. Can it route to another agent to agent seamlessly? Is there a knowledge gap or a latency gap between that? Even at we have almost 15,000 employees at UKG, we still struggle with that problem. So that's one of the problems we're currently trying to iron out, is we have so many agents being built, tested in their own little silos. We have another team that's focused on bringing it back together.
Got it. So building and testing is happening in a decentralized way where many are you've given them space to create, invent, but the actual deployment before it actually goes to your end customer, they're still a centralized team that's holding that authority. Is that a team that does testing? Do they, improve that agent? Are they giving best practices of how to improve it over time? And who's responsible to make sure that the agent is truly production ready and is ready to either interact with other agents or maybe be that downstream agent that end users can interact with?
Yeah. So the short answer is right now that's being gate kept by the platform and AI team, so my team. And the reason for that is the expertise. And so, not to shift this topic a little, but to build off of it, a lot of the struggle is the expertise across the board, right? So you have these subject matter domain teams that are really good at payroll, HR, scheduling. They're being enabled to build AI. They're being told how to build AI. They tinker, but at the end of the day, their background in building with AI agents, RAG, any of those frameworks is minimal. And so now there's core AI like sets of teams, one of them being mine that has many years of experience, that's enabling and also gatekeeping. And I think a lot of organizations, especially big ones, are going through this AI transformation right now. And I think this is where it's interesting because when I was in my startup, you could very selectively hire for specific roles. And you still can do that today in corporation. But my business has been around for 25 years. And there's people that are working there that are so ingrained in the old technology space, they have to adopt the new rapidly changing AI landscape. That's the challenge. And so my role is like two parts. One is build technology for customers. The other part is help enable internal teams how to understand how to build technology for customers. So it's a lot of training and enablement on top of giving them the space to tinker and play. But at the end of the day, we're gatekeeping that experience so that it's consistent, accurate, trustworthy. That like those are the pillars that we judge when they build an agent off to the side. We bring it back for review and we gatekeep it.
So funny, I think of this analogy of the App Store review team. You've got this agent review team inside of your company that's saying,
Yes.
not ready. You haven't
Yes.
met, our criteria yet. You've got to go back to the book and start
Perfect
building.
analogy.
That's funny.
Perfect analogy.
It is interesting, like with UKG drawing, it seems like a line in the sand, which is saying that, hey, instead of going out and buying, potential AI solutions and bringing them in, using them, we're going to just build these agents in-house. Does that feel like that was an explicit decision? And I'm also curious, like, is this buy versus build decision in other companies, let's say similar size to UKG, which is huge, right? 15K. But do you see a trend in them bringing AI development in-house and building more custom solutions for internal tools usage, or rather you see like something else?
Good question. We are building in-house, but we are definitely actively acquiring companies. So very similar to what you're seeing with like Meta and Netflix and like all these massive companies. We're not on that scale, but they're acquiring their AI talent. And that's a route that we're going down too, because hiring for it is tough. There's like finding good talent is sparse throughout the country. And so this is, sort of speaking to founders, right? Like I view if I was starting a business today, there's more exits than there were back when I started my startup, right? Like an Acqui-Hire is actually a good route to build towards, right? Like you're basically building a platform of valuable technology while also carrying skill sets that are extremely valuable to large companies. That's a build to buy strategy that we did not. Like that was considered a bad outcome when I was building. So then obviously we're looking at companies to acquire that have valuable AI technology. But if we can buy, 25, 50, 100 super skilled AI employees, the value is insane to us because we don't have to train. There's a large cost that gets built into the valuation there that I think the Metas of the world have set that market really high. And so and I don't know if founders are thinking that way or not, but that's an avenue for an exit could be amazing.
AI founders, if you're listening in, this is your moment. You figured out your exit strategy. There's a company out here that wants to grow and your knowledge is needed.
Yes.
So here's a good PSA for them right now.
Building one small company.
Yeah. Anyone who's working really hard tonight, stay up a little bit later and work a little bit harder. Josh, first of all, that's interesting. You're right. You're acquiring knowledge, you're acquiring talent, and ideally you're acquiring some IP in the process. Maybe it gets engulfed, maybe it gets used, but at the end of the day, the knowledge is really where it is. This is a big bit of a shift, but it's very interesting for those that are listening in. For big companies like yourself, how do you evaluate some of these candidates or some of these companies for Acqui-Hire? How do you say, while you're looking at AI agents and you're reviewing those, how do you review these members, this talent, and say, yeah, you've got what it takes? How do you look for that? Because that's really interesting. I don't think all of recruiting has caught up to this. So if you've thought about this, very curious to hear that.
So disclaimer, I'm not on the M&A team, but I definitely push my opinions up to the M&A team. So honestly, the first thing, and this is something that I'm starting to learn, is becoming common for the Zapiers of the world. Every hire, it doesn't matter what role, required to build an agent and then talk about it. And I found that really interesting strategy, even for people that are in accounting, HR, sales, people that are traditionally not tinkering with technology. If you can find talent on all sides of the business that are familiar with how to build an agent and just the concepts, now you have people that are knowledgeable about selling an AI product. You have knowledgeable people about how to doing accounting and financial numbers for AI solutions, marketing. So from my point of view, going to buy a company I would look at their criteria for how they hired and then figure out what their each role or department, their involvement is with AI solutions, right? Because at this point, I would expect any startup that's 10, 50, 100 employees, I would expect every division, every side of the business to be using 1 to 5 agents to make their role, their outcomes better, productive, more efficient, whatever. That would be my expectation, right? So it's like, how are all sides of the business enabled with AI to make them leaner, to make them more efficient? But then I look at that as a skill set that, quite frankly, like large organizations, a lot of those same divisions, people are still in Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints. Things are getting lost in unstructured data worlds. And that, like, when we go to like look at an AI company outside of the product and the value that has, that's the first thing I'd be looking at. And I'm recommending when looking at companies like that.
I love it. So, I'll get back to the focus in UKG. You're decentralized the ability for agents to be built. With where AI is today, with the role that you have and the department that you have inside of a company like UKG, are executive leaders now much less skeptical? They are excited. They're pushing on risk a little bit more. The risk appetite has grown for AI. How are you seeing that shift? Are you seeing that more comfortability there where you are deploying more into the workforce? How does that work?
Yeah, I think I would say like legal is one area that still hasn't caught up, but our CEO, former CEO at SAP, she is bullish to the max on AI. And we are pushing a lot of new boundaries when it comes to AI in areas that, like I said, our customers are not used to it. So we're trying to be on the forefront of a customer base that is still in the flip phone and, playing Snake on their phone era. So when it comes to the executive leadership, I think what I've seen is that a lot of them have started to realize that if they're not fully invested in it at this point, they're either needing to carve out an entire niche for the business. We have a competitor that has completely said we want no involvement with AI. That's either a mountain to die on, or you're going to be a leader in 5 to 10 years. But our executives are all in, and what that means is that it's a top down push on, you either need to embrace it and work on innovating with it, or you need to find a different place to work. Because I think at this point I'm realizing, like, if people aren't using AI just to improve their day-to-day job and their output, they're either going to work themselves into the ground, or again, they're going to probably fail compared to the rest of their colleagues. And it's starting to become noticeable because people are getting really good with using the Replit and Lovables of the world to prototype ideas, N8N or Zapiers to build workflows, automate their simple cleaning their inbox and getting speedy responses internally. So executives are looking at it from like all angles. It's like the sales side, it's also the productivity and, are you efficient at your 8-hour workday point of view?
One thing that strikes me as how it can become a moat in of itself by how the internal operations are being streamlined with AI. And, with UKG, it's like, this is our moat. Like, we're going to go super heavy and maybe aligned with this quote that I like, which is, anything is possible, but it's harder than you think. And the idea is that just a massive amount of investment that's going on becomes an edge that, in 5, 10, 15 years, people just can't just wake up one day and try to like overcome. And particularly like where I see the trend as it is going with, models are improving. It's a little incremental. I think where that has like sort of tapered, I think we are seeing a larger ecosystem of support of the guardrails, of recovery, of orchestration, and other things that are now creating reliability, structure, scale. And so how that gets deployed effectively internally can also reflect externally in what gets produced and the services get delivered, revenue generated, etc. So do you have major predictions going into 2026 and onwards about like how the trends will continue to go for building with AI?
Yeah, honestly, I think context is going to be the new king, right? So just to frame that a little bit, like so when when you're using ChatGPT or Claude and you're asking, hey, based on everything you know about me, how do I solve this or create this framework for me? That's context, memory and context. For organizations, that is the $50 billion problem to solve right now, is how do we solve the context problem so that the user experience becomes so fluid and human-like that it doesn't feel like an AI solution. It just feels like your actual assistant, your co-pilot, whatever. And I don't think, just using ChatGPT or Claude as an example, I know how I generally know how they handle their memory and their context infrastructure. And it's interesting, but it still doesn't do an amazing job because there's so much knowledge. That, in my opinion, that's the trend. That's the next evolution of what's going to become like the winning solution or the winning value proposition and differentiator. Because right now we're all building agents, we're all building Gen AI solutions to solve all these different use cases. We're collecting data, the context of how you frame or understand what they're asking for, and then weave that into the next conversation or the next ask. That's king. I mean, we haven't solved for it. We're not close to solving for it, but that's my prediction of like where this is going to shift. And again, if I was building a company, it's an insanely hard problem to solve for, but that would be where I would be looking to solve.
Something I think pretty actively about now is I think we had this maybe first two eras of here, look, I'm here to provide some information or insight back to you. How's the weather? Fix my email. And I think that's pretty straightforward and simple. For me, it feels like now the focus is a lot more about goal seeking, not just creating a plan, but actually enacting that plan. So can I write the email and then send it for you? Can I have a note of, follow up, and then can I execute the follow up? For me, I think that's where it's got to go. I mean, to me, it's, just sharing information that you copy and paste and then do the action for. Yes, I mean, it did save some time. We're very happy with the time we're saving. But I think if you're really talking about multiplying time, you've got to execute on the task. And I think you take bit by bit, you set the objective, let the agent help with setting the objective, and then set that multi-step. I mean, I'm seeing that happening more now. That's actually what we are actively working on at Jeeves as well, not just providing insight, but taking the action for you. This many people didn't put a receipt on their card transactions because we're in the finance space and spend management space. Would you like me to follow up with them? Would you like me to send a report? Many of them didn't get an invoice. Invoices in this country help with tax deduction. Would you like me to go and get that for you? And I think that is really where it has to go, because just providing context on, look, 20 people didn't do it, or 15 people did this, or I've rewritten this for you, or I've translated it for you. I feel like there were tools that let me do that. And I'm now doing it perhaps a bit more efficiently. But to be honest, I don't see a multiple until I see true execution. And I believe that's where the agent space is going. And I feel that that's probably what you all are building towards as well, because you're spending all this time putting the right infrastructure in place. And I have to believe that that's a big action that your company is focused on and that you particularly are focused on.
100%. I think the action piece is super valuable. The preference and the context and knowledge behind, I don't need to think to tell you, hey, go send a follow-up, or it starts to understand previous behavior and have confidence in your preference on how to solve for that, right? How to take the next action. I think that's I think I agree with you. Like being able to complete the whole decision tree of, I have a request, I need to complete a task, and now I need you to act on that task. In order for us, I go back to the trust thing. In order for us to trust it, I think it needs to be very aware of our preference, how we would handle that situation. What, like if it was to send an email, it needs to mimic my style of email before I'm trusting it to send it on its own, the type of words I would want to use. And so taking action is important. And then the preference and historical knowledge, being contextually aware of how to take that next action, that's where it'll become insane.
Honestly, man, I feel like this is like the fact that you're like big company is so different. I feel like you're kind of like pushing founders to say, holy shit, I have an opportunity. I think founders always just kind of believe like I could just keep running and selling my thing. But I think you're kind of giving a whole new light to, there's a lot of like, you're learning at a pace that we haven't quite gotten. Like, let us capture that knowledge from you. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like the narrative I'm taking from this, which is Like we're building the core infrastructure to do something that is probably at a massive scale. Everything you just mentioned, my company does it at like a fraction of what you just said. Like we do it so haphazardly. I'll be honest. Like we do it so haphazardly. Everything you said sounds so like structured. Like you're actually building like a building here. I'm over here like I'm trying to put together like a set of sticks and put some glue and tape around it and hope I could ship that and get to my next investment round. I mean, you remember what that life was like.
Yes, I do.
But where my mind was going as you were talking about it, particularly around the idea of like building AI workflows that actually can complete actions. And for internal use cases, context is huge. Being able to obviously uh, be able to do it with reliability consistently is important. Data governance, the right privacy controls, these are all things that make me think like, can an external solution or even service team effectively build in-house tools, or is it always going to have to be for companies that really want to do it the right way, invest in an internal team building internal tools around this AI, and potentially building out the same type of workflows that you're building out at UKG, which is the centralization and then coupling back again, approval workflows, deployment, things like that. This is just a thought exercise, but like I'm thinking about a future state if we take it to a logical extreme, which is some of the most powerful, effective companies will have internal AI governance that is like deploying AI work out internally. And that is going to be a huge differentiator in the market. It's going to push them all to adopt AI much more quickly. Where does your mind go when you think about that?
So I'm with you. And I think that, so we don't have this right now, but I truly think that all sides of the business should have a technologist or multiple I call it a technologist, somebody who could, let's just say like, we have support, we have sales, marketing, implementation, accounting, finance. We have all those divisions, right? They have an operations element to it, but operations is typically more so around supporting manual operational and basic automated use cases. We need to have technologists tied to these teams, and the technologists can translate the problems of sales, support, whatever whatever that team is, understand their problems and apply it to building an agent or an AI solution to start solving their day-to-day workflows. And I know that smaller startups or founders at an early or even growth level, this is happening, right? And so this is how they're operating at in a lean way, where they're generating $100 million in ARR with 25, 50 people. Large companies like mine haven't figured that out yet. Some of them are starting to hire for these roles, but it's more, again, it's a central team that focuses on all. I think the playbook is you tie one or two technologists to each one of these divisions. The amount of improvement, where if you tied a technologist to a sales organization, you would test how many leads are coming in how many leads are coming in with AI agents, how many demos are being delivered with a human, how many demos are being delivered with an AI agent that's helping build those demos rapidly, right? Like, I think that's the first step of where larger companies need to shift. And it's an opportunity for a new role for somebody out there who's trying to redefine themselves, maybe a former product manager, former engineer, even former UX designer who's like, I want to reinvent myself. I think there's a big opportunity for that type of role.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think about it a lot, which is, where are these roles going? Engineers, PMs, designers, because it's changing so rapidly of what anyone can do, like as a general public, relative to what we thought were specialist outcomes. Building prototypes, building a product, or even generating a design, graphics, marketing copy. These are all things that are raising the bar of what we are considering specialist outcomes, right? So I see two things, right? One is that the specialists need to become even more specialized. They need to use the AI workflows, raise the bar, but then take it to another level. A term that comes up a lot now is taste, having very opinionated viewpoints that are, valuable to whatever end outcome they're doing. So that's one thing. But secondly, as what you were pointing to is they need to redefine themselves in a certain way, which is like, I'm not just a designer, I'm not just an engineer. There's new words that are coming out, what is it called, like I'm a product engineer. There's these AI words that are coming out, like, of newly defined roles coming up. I don't know.
Forward engineer.
Yes, yes, yeah. Forward deployed engineers and things like that. So this is more of a philosophical question, right? Where does employment go in, like, theoretically 5 to 10 years? Where do you think, how does work change, not just from like a tactical, like individual level of, hey, I need to start using tools, but like in broad, like societal change, like how does work and how we relate to it change, in your opinion?
It's a good question. I think it goes from, like, I'll use these words and then explain it. It goes from configuration to coordination. So if you think about somebody who's currently right now, they're clicking a lot of buttons to complete tasks, and inputting data, whatever they're doing. Now you're like, with AI and agents and how it's improving productivity, the next shift is, it's like elevating everybody to be more strategic, more visionary, more creative. You have more time to think big picture and comprehensively. And I think that unlocks this new level of um, outcomes, unlocks like a larger horizon of strategy, because we spend a lot of time doing tactical things, and like there's eventually that has a lot of diminishing returns when it comes to your productivity. So I think everybody's like this, but like I need a minimum of about an hour and 15-minute block for me to like sink my teeth into
Yeah.
something. If I have a 30-minute block or 45-minute block on my calendar, I'm like, I'll check my email, I'll send some messages. I can maybe get a couple, like I can't get into deep thinking. And I obviously intentionally will create those blocks, but that will start cascading across all roles, and then it redefines their role, right? Like I'm going to use a very, a janitor, right? Like a janitor is a very manual job where they are going around an entire building, office building, school, whatever, and they are cleaning and making sure everything's kept up, tidy, and that takes most of their time. If there was a robot that was doing the cleaning, what does the janitor now think about? The janitor can start thinking about, I'll say, how to keep things stocked, a different approach
The
for,
schedule for the robot, like where
yeah,
they need to go at a given time.
exactly. And then it can potentially start scaling that, right? Like I think in every area, and that was just off the top of my head, but in every type of role, from the most manual to data entry or marketing or product management, there is always going to be an opportunity to scale the strategy or the vision of what you could possibly do. So I don't know. I'm not a believer in it's going to replace jobs. I just think it's going to change. It's going to change the expectations or the outcomes by the job. There will be some jobs that get eliminated, but then there will be new jobs that get opened up, and it just sort of, it'll balance out.
I flip flop a little bit between thinking about just, let's say, base productivity increasing much, much higher, right? If individual productivity is increasing to a point where, now there's a lot of excess staff, right? That you don't need, the proper capitalist thing to do is obviously terminate.
Yes.
I used to work at Amazon, so it's just kind of interesting to hear about what's going on, just layoffs like continuing on even in this year in 2026. Two major layoffs they're going to announce. But the other side, as you mentioned, right, of where I think is a more optimistic outcome is that, productivity increases so much to the point that we are now doing way more things that require other jobs, right? So, like, to put that example, actually, I'm not going to use your example, but it's more to say like a future where we're just doing so many more services. There's new industries that pop up, new interesting things that are happening, and now we need people for that. And people who are doing deep work, creative work in trying to design and architect and think about new innovative ways to improve human quality of life. And I think that's all the way on the other end of optimism, obviously, but life, I think, ends up all usually long term balancing out somewhere in the middle.
I agree. I mean, it's definitely hard to right now say that it's going to be the full optimistic path, because we're, like you said, we're seeing the layoffs. But I also think the layoffs are happening because a company needs to sort of regather itself and figure out. It can't be in a transitional state where it says, I have all these people that used to do a thing and now I'm going to repurpose them. They have to form a strategy and a vision, and they will then go through another wave of hiring with a different type of job role and expectations. So I think we're in this reactive phase where companies have not figured out the new outcomes and expectations, but the new roles will come. It's just they haven't figured out what that looks like yet. And it's just this pendulum swing, right? It felt abrupt because AI technology rapidly evolved, but I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic that the pendulum's going to swing back and there's going to be this whole new set of job roles that didn't exist before because companies have had time to think about, oh, these are my new set of problems with AI in the company org structure. Now I need these types of roles, and the jobs will reopen. Not everybody, but hopefully a good chunk of those people that were laid off maybe reinvented themselves.
Yeah, we'll just have to see and live it and breathe it. We're talking about the future, so I have to ask, what are you most excited about coming up in the next few years? Something that you're working on, maybe things you can't tell us, but what's the things that's getting you most excited about?
So I could give you the easy answer and talk about some technology or cool stuff. Honestly, the thing I'm most excited about is I have a very large challenge ahead of me in terms of leveling up a lot of my coworkers, colleagues, people that report to me that have not been using AI, and figuring out how to make this organizational transformation of getting people more adept to using AI on a frequent basis and using it to help themselves. And like something that has started that I think is getting really good traction is these small little group forums. We call them Skill Jam or Happy Hour, Tech Happy Hour, where people get together and they start sharing the productivity hacks or different ways they're using AI, building agents, like N8N workflows. It's an idea spark that happens internally that is starting to grow and grow. And it's doing like AI teaching trial by fire. And I think it's a really good tactic or, can call it ceremony to implement in your company if you're struggling with like AI adoption across everybody. I also really like the idea of making it a requirement as a part of hiring to, have somebody build an agent and have them walk through their logic and explain it to you and start getting to people to think and wrap their head around the concepts, because it's all the same stuff. It's just different words, different terms, and different ways to apply it. So I'm really excited for the challenge of just helping people grow, helping people level up, because then that all translates into the product we're building and, the company's value and et cetera, and et cetera. So I have, almost 15 years of AI experience, and I'm at the point now where I want to share it, and I also want to help people apply it, and that really excites me.
Man, I feel like that is a role in of itself of like, whether it's the AI champion or like just the educational aspect of upskilling, practically a generation, like I think like, let's say 5-10 years, the workforce will look very different, obviously. But because of how quickly things have changed in the past few years, right? We're talking about less than 5 years. Effectively, the world have changed in terms of like what we thought was possible. And maybe in 5 years from now, things will be even more different. So it's kind of like, I think we need a support group, is what I'm trying to say. I think we need like a group of people just like always just helping us like kind of adjust and adapt. So I think it's beyond the like the work aspect of it. I think you're helping a lot of people, Josh. So I'm really happy that you're there doing it, because someone's got to do it, Josh. Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it's you.
Hopefully it's more than me, right? Like it's just you.
Yeah.
I think you just create the forum and people like run with it, and that's my hope, because it's exciting. You just got to see it in action, and that's what I'm saying. People are starting to see examples of what an agent can do or what an automated workflow can do, and then they you see the sparks behind their eyes just explode.
Yeah.
Where do you, for those who are still getting started trying to build maybe not their first or second agents, but building the best versions, any feedback for them, any unsolicited advice that you could share that helped to bring that world of agents to a higher standard?
I would say, well, so the way I would go about building an agent is creating just simple requirements, like typical product mindset. You just build, you understand who you're building it for, whether it's you or, your mom or a friend, and then work backwards off of them. Understand what the requirements are, understand the tasks or the expectations of whoever's using it, and then write some requirements, feed it into ChatGPT, iterate it, or Claude, iterate it, create your output, and then seed some data, right? Like seed some data so that you can touch it and feel it, feed it into a prototype, take it to the next level, and then once that's all done, just start building from there, right? Like I think prototyping is the fastest way to build an agent, because building an agent just from the get go, I think you're gonna do more tinkering. If you had some sort of prototype of the agent you want to build, I think you can probably build the agent itself at a much faster rate. So that's, again, I go back to, you could build an agent and interact with it through like a CLI, but that's not how most people are going to interact with it unless you're building an agent for a developer. So think about the user experience, think about what the person is expecting and the outcomes, and work backwards. I mean, technology wise, I'm probably not the best person there's bazillion different frameworks and different types of technologies you can use to build it. But the approach should definitely be, what do I want this thing to do? And what are the expectations of whoever's using it, and how would they interact with it?
Well, Josh, this was probably one of the best conversations I had in 2026. Still pretty early, granted, but yeah, it was incredible because at the end of the day, like you're building it at a scale that most people don't have the opportunity with AI. In terms of like small use cases and startups or otherwise, like there's plenty of solutions that have grown obviously like quite large, but you're doing it in-house internally up, and not just the product technical side of the delivery but the people side, which is arguably just as if not more important. So thanks for sharing all that info with us. It was really awesome. I hope people that are watching get some value out of it too. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, guys, for inviting me onto the show. This was fun. Really enjoyed talking with you guys. I think there's a lot to be learned from, what you guys are doing, and love the forum and the back and forth. So looking forward to your future podcasts to come as well.
Yeah, we'll check in 2027.
Yeah.
All right, thanks y'all.